been welcomed in around the world in a very different way to previous years as coronavirus continues to cause chaos globally with more than 1.5 million deaths. Israel has become the first country to vaccinate 10% of its population against COVID as the third nationwide lockdown continues with virus cases steadily on the rise. And the UK has finally left the EU, putting to bed the long-running Brexit saga, with many in opposition to the move fearing dire financial consequences. Hello and Happy New Year. I'm Sarah Coates and thanks for joining me here on the I24 News Desk with all of the top stories making headlines this hour. Well, fireworks, concerts and virtual celebrations around the world are marking the end of a year unlike any other. Now, with people eager to leave 2020 in the past, officials are warning partygoers to observe the occasion at a distance without gathering in large numbers. Now, in the US, the year ends with a grim milestone, setting a new record for the highest daily number of deaths and hospitalizations since the pandemic began. Here's more.
In Australia and Thailand, Moscow and Dubai, France and Ireland. The world celebrating the end of a year unlike any other and looking forward to what the future has in store.
I believe 2021 is above all the year when we will eventually do those everyday things that now seem lost in the past.
It's been exactly a year since mysterious cases of sickness were first reported to the World Health Organization. Over the following 365 days, COVID-19 touched all corners of the earth and changed our way of life.
This is surreal.
In the city that never sleeps, quiet streets, New Yorkers eager to see 2020 in the rearview mirror.
Thank God it's over. Start fresh tomorrow.
For nearly 120 years, revelers have gathered in Times Square to ring in the new year. But in early 2020, New York City was an epicenter of the pandemic.
Hopefully it'll be a better year. Could stamp this virus out and get on with our lives.
So in lieu of crowds and all-night parties, an event to honor workers who dedicated their lives to serving during the crisis.
I'm really happy to be here as one of the select few who get to kick 2020 out the door.
But as the U.S. hits grim new milestones in the pandemic, the country and the world wait in anticipation for the shining ball to drop and bring with it better days ahead.
I guarantee you I will push that button on time and make sure we get the new year immediately.
Meanwhile, Israel, which has become the first country to vaccinate 10% of its population against coronavirus, which has killed more than 3,000 people in Israel alone since the beginning of the pandemic. Now, there are more than 300 vaccination centres set up around the country for citizens to go and get a shot, with close to 1 million people already rolling up their sleeves.
We are in the approaching the end of the second week of the vaccinations in the hospital. We had 1 week to organize this complex operation, and actually we do it because the hospitals are more capable of organizing in such short notice, and we believe that more and more of the population will get vaccinated in the community. We vaccinated up to now 1,700 of our employees and 2,700 of the general population, according to the Ministry of Health criteria, which are mostly people older than 60 years.
This is an historic moment. Every person will remember when he got the vaccine. This is something that will be talked about for another 100 to 200 years. The whole world is getting vaccinated. It's a step forward, and maybe in another 500 years there will be fewer disease or none at all.
It's a wonderful feeling. We feel like we got our lives back. I hope that everyone will be vaccinated, and within a few months we will forget about the disease, same as we did for other ones.
I'm a big believer in science, and this vaccine is a great achievement. It means we can soon return to normal, hug our grandchildren, and be as free as before.
And for more, let's take you live to the streets of Tel Aviv, where we're joined by our correspondent, Emily Rose there. Emily, Happy New Year to you. Firstly, we do know that Israel is into its third lockdown. Our businesses have to be closed. Many school children are studying from home, etc. But it is looking pretty busy there behind you. What do people have to say?
Well, Sarah, I'm just going to show you here. This is called Shuk Levinsky. It's a street that normally opens up as a kind of street market on Fridays for people who are young. Those are the people who mostly live in this neighborhood. They're usually students or people in their 20s and 30s. And they've come out here today. Supposedly, a lot of these shops are supposed to be closed, only doing delivery. But you can see that they've opened up here for business. And people are sitting out here on the streets gathering against perhaps the restrictions of the government. But still, this is what it would typically look like, maybe a little bit more busy than this on a Friday before the coronavirus crisis. You can see that it's not as busy as that, but still bustling here. And as we can remember here, this is Israel's third lockdown. So it looks like people have kind of decided that perhaps this lockdown, they're not going to take it as seriously as the last few where we saw people keeping to their homes. And they're out in the streets here enjoying their Friday afternoon, shopping and going about their business.
So really, Emily, what is the point of this lockdown? We are seeing staggering coronavirus numbers up towards the 6,000 mark daily, which we were only seeing back in, say, October. What can we expect from the government if these businesses and citizens don't begin adhering to these regulations?
Well, when we look at the comments made by the health minister in the past few days, it looks as though he's trying to encourage people to really keep this lockdown and tell them that we're not past that hurdle yet. As you did mention earlier in the broadcast, Israel is making great gains in terms of vaccinating a wide percentage of its population ahead of other nations, but still those staggering numbers continue to rise. Hospitals still continuing to really struggle to keep capacity with those who are critically ill. So at this time, we can see that a lot of officials are trying to encourage people to try to keep those regulations. But if you notice here, what's happening around me is perhaps indicative of a lot of the messages that have gone out throughout this crisis, which is that some people are just unsure about the restrictions, some of them don't know, and some of them at this point look like as though at least they don't exactly care at this point. So it could be an uphill battle for those officials to try to convince people to stay home. And if this scene behind me is any indication, then it could be a while before Israel does actually succeed at getting those numbers down.
Yeah, well, it's certainly looking that way, Emily, and you can't really blame these people getting out and about. It's absolutely amazing weather here in Israel at the moment, really in the middle of winter. Emily, I want to talk now about this so-called coronavirus cabinet. They're not all agreeing, are they, on these restrictions which are in place?
Yes, there are those who are talking about, they're saying, and even from the beginning said, that schools should remain closed, that some should learn from home, that some grades should learn from home. This also caused a big spark of debate among the teachers who weren't necessarily going to get on the list to get a vaccine, and then they insisted if they have to teach, then they should get the vaccine. There are a lot of debates about how this closure should be, and we have to remember that this is very different from other closures in the sense that Israel never exactly came out of its last round of closure. We never saw a full opening up. We never saw restaurants, for example, be able to serve people indoors. We didn't see a lot of stores be able to operate at full capacity. So a lot of debates between the economy and trying to get these numbers down, not everyone agreeing, and perhaps a lot of that confusion is transpiring back to the streets, that the messages that we're seeing being relayed to the people unsure about what this lockdown really means could also transpire to that kind of confusion on the streets and disobeying of the rules, so-called.
Yeah, and we are hearing a lot of people do have what's called coronavirus fatigue. Emily Rose out and about on the streets of Tel Aviv, thank you so much for bringing us a look, and we will come back to you a little later on. But we do need to go out for a short break. But when we come back, violent clashes in Jerusalem between police and settlers, with vehicles torched and officers injured. We'll bring you the full story right after this. Stay with us.